Welcome back to That Workplace Experience podcast, the podcast where we look at the best design in workplaces and the people behind the projects. In this episode, we're looking at Sustainable Workplaces, part of Sustainable Ventures' ecosystem for climate tech startups. The project is located in County Hall in London, transforming a previously derelict 40,000 square foot space into a hub for innovative companies focused on climate technology. Today, we're talking to Dickon Hayward, the director and founder of Material Works, who are the design practice behind the project. We discuss how sustainability can shape the design of workspaces, how reusing materials and rethinking traditional fit-out approaches can create inventive, lower carbon environments, and how unlearning everything you know can lead to a more exciting solution. If you want a more detailed deep dive into this project, please make sure you pick up the PDF from the show notes, and always make sure you're watching this in video format so you can see the amazing footage of the space we're talking about today. Today we are joined by Dickon Hayward, who is the founder and director of Material Works, which I believe you started about 8 years ago?
Yes, we'll be 8 years coming up. Coming up quite soon. So yeah,
exciting times. You've done quite a lot of lovely projects, considering you had COVID slap bang in the middle of it all.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, a few ups and downs. COVID hitting us right when we were about to start our largest project to date wasn't a great time, but we've since come back, and it's good. It's good at the moment.
You built up a really nice portfolio, and
thanks.
I think the one we want to talk about today is Sustainable Workplace. Okay,
so Sustainable Workspaces is part of a broader organisation called Sustainable Ventures, and they describe themselves as an ecosystem for startup companies focused in climate technology. So it's a group of new companies all doing quite innovative things with technology, but all focused towards saving the planet, essentially. So some examples, there's a small company in there that's using satellite imagery to look at heat loss in cities. There's another company that's making fair trade chocolate deals. Other companies helping you get a heat pump installed in your home. So all sorts of things, but very innovative focused, but still very commercial.
So it's a bit like an incubator for...
So Sustainable Ventures, supports them through various ways, through investment, through giving them marketing services, graphic design, but also, importantly for us, providing space. So physical space where they can all come together, they can work alongside each other, share ideas, and also where they can reach out to a broader community by organising events and workshops and lectures and a whole series of things. So it's really trying to create a centre for new industry, really, and kind of catapult new ways of thinking about things, which is an exciting brief.
Yeah, we had a really interesting walk around there in County Hall, and I think one of the things that leads nicely into that is you said you kind of had to unlearn everything that you'd sort of been taught over time as an architect, because it was quite a challenging brief.
The circumstances were really challenging. So, before we get to the brief, the what we started with was a shell in County Hall, which is obviously a very well-known historic ex-home of the GLC.
Did you say that was sort of empty from 89 or something?
Yeah, I think the GLC moved out late 80s. And that space, which is about 40,000 square foot on the 5th floor, had been empty ever since. Wow. So it had slowly been degrading. Things had been ripped out, never replaced. Occasionally it was used as a film set. Yeah. So, it's it was amazing because it was a derelict space with a view of Parliament, which is quite unique in London. So, occasionally you see it in the background of a movie. But it was like walking into a ruin. So there were smashed windows, there were pigeons living in there, there was no running water, no power, nothing. So, for the start of a workspace project, that's a pretty unusual premise. And then, the brief was to do something that was, advocating their values for Sustainable Ventures. So a big focus on sustainability and seeing how how we could do something quite radical, quite different, and challenge assumptions. And the other thing, I guess, the important starting point was that it was all very finitely, very, very limited funds. So there was it was financed through several grants, like the Affordable Workspace grant from Lambeth Council and a few other pots. But it was a focus on making an affordable end product with a very limited budget. So quite a few unusual challenges coming together from day one.
Yeah, I think it's out there, isn't it? So it was 4 million, I think. I've seen it on a few websites here and there. So
Yeah. I mean, depending on how you calculate it, but I mean, we reckon it was under £100 a square foot for a fit out, which is what we typically call not just Cat A and Cat B, but also starting with a ruin. So there was a lot of work to do.
And for me, as I walk around, that's kind of forced you to do these really interesting interventions here and there. And what really surprised me, considering you've got all these challenges, is how inventive and explorative you've got. And you've got really cool people involved. You've got those really wonderful organic panels. Yeah. You've got the mycelium baffles. There's some really interesting stuff in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's sort of two panel, various things that we kind of had to focus in on. But one of them was clearly looking at materiality. We're going to be increasingly interested in embodied carbon and what that means, not just from a kind of energy perspective, but from an aesthetic perspective as well. Yeah. When you start looking at materials and you look at the ones that utilize a lot of artificial chemicals and lots of energy in their production, and compare those to materials that are very low energy and based on natural content, then you start to see a very different kind of feel. So everything's got a lot more texture and a lot more grain. And I think you're starting to use those things, particularly in a backdrop like that, where you've got these kind of layers of history and kind of traces of previous intervention all over. It all becomes very, very kind of textured and very grainy, which we love, but is in many ways a kind of the opposite of what you start a commercial office job with, which is usually acres and acres of white plasterboard and raised access floor or something.
Well, I think for me in this space, it really celebrates that. Obviously, it's got a real pure history to it, but even just some of the details, like I think in the time before you had cores that pulled all the electrics and power and water through. There's a strip that's been cut out where you think there's pipe work, and you've suspended this beautiful fluorescent light in there. So made really celebrated all the little details.
Yeah, I think it's those things. We're not trying to hide anything really, and we're actually accentuating it, and it's part of the story. I mean, there's all sorts of, there's some of the great images that we got out of it. You can kind of see the wall in the background, and there's a layer of paint that seems to date back to the 1930s or something. Yeah. And then there's something obviously that's been layered onto that, and there's a scar down the wall where an old wall has been ripped away. And then there's a new bit of plaster that we've had to put in to kind of stop the thing falling to pieces. So you get all of that in the background of one scene, with a lot of kind of new joinery and things in the foreground, and it suddenly becomes this sort of really kind of rich composition of materials and history and all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
it's got a lovely feel to it, a real nice buzz. So just to talk people through it, you sort of come up onto the 5th floor of County Hall. You walk in, you've got the reception area, straight into a really nice cafe space where you've got these beautiful details. So you've got this the organic pulp that you've formed into panels.
Yeah, so we were really lucky to get introduced actually through our clients to various people who are doing interesting stuff with materials, and one of those was a company called Biome, and they're kind of really pushing the edge of what is possible with natural materiality. So those products were things that they were experimenting with at the time. The one on the bar where you look into is actually made of coffee grains. So they went around a load of local coffee shops. They're actually based in sort of southeast London, got a load of coffee grains, and they use their wizardry and magic to somehow bind these things with natural products to create these materials.
But they had an interesting perfume when it first started.
Yeah, well, actually, going into their factory is incredible for that. You sort of go in, and it doesn't, there's no synthetic smell of manufacturing when you go in there. It's just a sort of massive sort of organic. Yeah, exactly. It feels really healthy from the start. But yeah, which is another thing that we just finished another project with them. We used a load of hemp boards and things. And one of the things people say about that, we chose it because of its sustainability and its texture, but actually the smell is a kind of farmyardy, but not in a bad way. If that kind of just very
there's a
real
sweet
wholesome
tone to it. Yeah,
and I think when people talk about sick building syndrome and things like that, you think, well, that's kind of the antithesis to that. It's the antithesis to a nylon carpet, really, isn't it? But anyway.
Yeah, I love the fact that the coffee bar's got the coffee and the other spaces have got different pulp.
Yeah, there's fruit peel, I think we used on the other one. So yeah, I mean it's a great product, and it was, what's interesting about that is they were really focused on how you form these things without using very much energy. So instead of using like a vacuum former or something that was stretched to make 3-dimensional shapes, everything's done with gravity and just time and a bit of patience. So we used a load of twisted rags that were laid out on a table, and then that material was just poured over that. And over time, it settled, and then it cured.
Is it like a thick liquid, or is it?
Yeah, when it goes in, it's kind of a sludgy, mush, I guess. And then, rather than baking it, it's designed so it slowly cures at room temperature. And then you lift it up, and it's a panel. I mean, they originally designed it to be used as a tile,
right?
Like a flat tile, which it works well as, but.
Yeah, you said when it was getting larger, it started to bow a little, so you lent into
and it was
that.
experimental. So there were a bit of trial and error there, and you need a client who's willing to go with that. And the first lot didn't work out, and so the second lot did, but it came right at the last minute. So you have to be prepared to go along with things. I mean, the mycelium that you mentioned before that we used as kind of acoustic attenuation on the ceiling. So instead of hanging bits of polystyrene or textiles up there, we used a raw mycelium, and again it has a bizarre kind of visual appearance, which is fascinating and a real conversation piece.
It looks a bit like a slab of concrete, an aged concrete as well, to a degree, doesn't it? So it looks like it's sort of hanging really precariously above your head, but it's probably very lightweight, I assume.
Yes, when you lift it up, it feels like a piece of polystyrene. It's really light, but the textures, and of course it's always unique. Every piece looks different because it's grown and coloured itself in very different ways, and it's all left untreated, so there's no finish on it or anything. And it's all grown within, sort of walking distance of the final site, which is kind of interesting.
Because I think people's temptation, and what I love about the project, I think, without gushing too much, is that when you've got a tight budget, it's very easy to cut corners, and everything that you've done, it's been very deliberate. But I love the fact you've gone off and done all this exploration to find these quirky little things as additions.
Yes. Rather
than just say, you know what, we haven't got much money, let's cut down on what we do.
Well, I think, the money plus sustainability is always an interesting conversation. And that was the thing that slightly threw us, to be honest, when we started the project, because we sat down with Sustainable Ventures and they said, this needs to be a flagship thing. We need to be going around the world and telling people we're doing something really interesting in terms of pushing forward the sustainability agenda in construction. Fantastic, we said. Oh, and by the way, it needs to be cheaper than anything we've ever done before. So, my immediate reaction is, well, that doesn't make sense, because if I'm going to specify a flooring or something, I can buy that one there that's pretty nasty for the planet but cheap as chips, or I can buy this one here which is lovely but probably twice the price. So the presumption is that sustainability has a price tag on. So that made us have to really think about the fundamentals, and actually then you start getting into it. What really makes a difference isn't so much what you use, but how much of it you use, and how you use it. So it's about being really strategic at the beginning of the design and saying, actually, all that stuff that we assume we need, let's not do any of it. Yeah. And where we are doing something, we'll do something really inventive, really innovative, and really different. Yeah. And then it's like contrasting those two together kind of actually allows us to have that sustainability agenda, and then, do something interesting at the same time and keep it just about within the budget.
I think that comes back to that unlearning everything, as you said.
Yeah.
It's where you've been trained to do these clean lines and perfection and detailing it's sort of unlearning all that to sort of create this interesting juxtaposition that's going on.
I mean, I think the other thing that's an important thing that we got into was thinking about circularity and the circular economy, which is much talked about. Every new planning application now has a circular economy statement that goes with it, which usually says something along the lines of, we'll try and reuse things at the end of life.
Did you hit any planning problems? Sorry to interrupt.
We didn't hit planning problems, but I mean, it's a listed building.
Yeah.
And we had a very eager design and conservation officer at Lambeth who wanted to talk quite a lot to us about what we wanted to do.
I suppose it was their money, right?
Partly, yeah. I mean, I think but when we started having the conversations and we explained to them that actually our approach was not one of reinvention, but one of stewardship. But we said we don't want to be in a cycle of putting stuff in, ripping out, putting stuff in. What we want to do is just celebrate what's here. And we want to really design a fit out which can be easily removed and you might never know it was ever there. So as soon as we started having those conversations, they were, that's kind of music to a design and conservationist ears, because it's like you're not messing with anything. So we didn't really do any damage to the listed building fabric at all. I mean, the one thing
did very little to the listed
well,
building
exactly, very little at all. But yeah, one of the things, was we had to put loads of plant on the roof. So that was kind of the thing that was sensitive, because obviously that's in quite a lot of pertinent views around London, is the roof line of that building, and there's already quite a lot of stuff up there. So that was tricky, but it's a technical challenge that we overcame.
It sounds like you had a lot of really good partnerships there. So
yeah.
You come in through the cafeteria, you're going into that sort of workspace, you've got lots of different offices and meeting rooms down the side, and the panelling was it looks demountable and like prefab, was it?
So we work with a great company called UBuild, who have basically invented a modular construction system made out of natural materials. So it's all plywood with full of sheep's wool inside to give it insulation. And the thinking behind their system is it can be put together and taken apart by anyone, really. So it's all about designing something that's super simple to construct and to demount. So when you walk through there, you'll see all the natural materials, which gives a particular vibe, but also you'll see all the fixings. So you'll see all the screws. So I think what I was saying to you when we were walking around is like, I spent beginning of my career trying to get rid of all that stuff, ages. How can we fix that up there so it looks like it's floating, and it's really kind of unthinking that and thinking, well, actually celebrating those fixings is a great thing, and it talking about aesthetics of sustainability, that's a key one. It has to be able to come apart, and those can come apart and be made into different walls in other places. Actually, quite a few of the boxes that they used to make those walls were from another project, Sustainable Ventures' previous project, which was downstairs. But also they can be demounted to reusable material. So you take it all completely apart and you've still got bits of wood which are big enough and sensibly proportioned to be reused. So yeah, that's a really important part of the story, to be honest.
And I think from on the back of it, you're saying that you've started to evolve products with UBuild, using the wood wool and the panelling to give more acoustic.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the challenge with all those new systems. And again, that's the brilliance of having a client who's open to take risks, because the first thing a big corporate client would say was, well, where's the sound data, the acoustic data for that partition, and are we sure that it's going to keep minus 30 decibels or whatever it is? And well, there was nothing like that, but we did a bit of testing and they were willing to kind of experiment a bit. If we do that, if we add different type of insulation, blah, 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 then we can make a few different changes and develop those things a bit. So the next iteration that we're working on them with is to like double up skins of walls and make things that are really very, very soundproof, so you can use for things like this, to make your podcast studio in the corner of the office or things. So
you've got rid of the pigeons.
Yep.
What is it the Sustainable Ventures were looking for you to achieve?
So,
what was their brief?
Sustainable Ventures, so they're a group of companies on various different sizes. So the primary thing that we were trying to achieve was to accommodate them in their day-to-day workspace. So if you come into the main entrance of the space, there's a big open reception, which works as a kind of meeting, greeting, social hub. There's a cafe in there, and that becomes a real kind of social heart of the space. And then as you kind of leave that, there kind of becomes increasing levels of separation and partition. So first of all, you're walking through a very open workspace, which is kind of quite informal, just big broad tables where people can sit down and work for a few hours and move on. Further on, there's some sort of dedicated desks that's primarily aimed for either sole traders or small companies, little teams of 2 or 3. And then further on from that, it then breaks down into separate offices of varying sizes. So the ambition is that they can accommodate people who are teams of 6, and they might grow into a team of 10 where they'll move around the corner where there's a slightly bigger office. And then intermingling with all of that, there are various sort of areas where people come together. So there's an important place, which is the kitchen, where the kitchen table is, where all the best conversations have, and that's a place where people can come and eat, obviously, meet and greet together. We have another area in the corner, which was started to be known as the View, which is an area where the best views out of the space are over the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben.
Is that the ones with the higher windows?
Yeah. And so that's a kind of multi-use space, but quite often it's just a breakout area full of sofas and tables and things. But they also can rearrange that to put small events on in the corner there. So they might have a talk, set up a few screens and things. But yes, there's a very nice feature where the big old window sills, because we're up in the roofs, the dormer windows where we can put some cushions in and people go and sit up there and gaze out over the river, which is nice. And then there's a much larger event space that overlooks a courtyard as well. So those are kind of dotted around. But then, between that, a sort of series of different more formal kind of working environments, I guess.
It's quite unusually laid out, isn't it? So is it round? Is it almost like a square?
Yeah, or? I mean, it can be quite easy to get
confused
lost.
First
but
time round,
I mean, it's such a massive building, County Hall, and our 40,000 square foot is about a third of one floor plate. So we're kind of around two different courtyards, and then overlooking London Bridge Road, and then over the River Thames to the north.
It felt a lot bigger than 40,000 square feet, funnily enough, to me. I don't know if it's because it's got the views out into the courtyard, you got a bit of terracing.
Yeah, I guess it's bigger. Kind of long and stretched out. And if you do the walk around the whole space that we did, then you go through quite a lot of different areas. But yeah.
So event space, obviously quite important, and that seems to be coming to the fore on quite a few of the projects we've seen, and certainly ones that we're working on. As you mentioned there's two really nice workspaces that I saw yesterday. One's quite a more formal one that you can divide into two that looks out to the courtyard. And then what I love was the really informal one where the view is. Yeah. And just the little details you've picked out, like the painting of the windows. Yeah. Windowsills, the window surround with the bright yellow, real pop of colour. But if it felt almost a little bit like an intimate living room type effect, even though they've got all the scenes set out.
Take that.
It was lovely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a kind of always increasing trend in workspace, really, isn't it? To ever since I've been working in it, it's sort of breaking away from the sort of formalities of office and getting people to be more sociable and more interactive. So I think trying to create more domestic environment, I don't know if that's the right word, but certainly something where people feel a bit more comfortable is definitely key to what we'd be trying to do.
There's definitely a feel for lots of different spaces and types where you want to work in different ways. Yeah. Even the cafe was a really nice place to work in as well, right?
Yeah. And I think trying to create the kind of variety of atmospheres, if you like. So, I mean, that area in the corner where the views are tends to be quite quiet during the days. So it is a place where you can go and kind of read or concentrate on something. Whether the cafe area is always much busier. So it's a more conversational space, and trying to create the differences in the sort of variations between all of those.
I'd definitely be Bagsy in a window box in the view. You talked about the kitchen and a few other areas, and there's some beautiful bit of reclaiming going on. I love the big kitchen table.
Yeah. So that is a whole bunch of tropical hardwood, but it's come from old science laboratories in secondary schools. I'm not entirely sure where.
It's like a patchwork. You've got people's names scratched into it.
All the graffiti from the
probably a bit of gum under there.
I think we managed to remove that. But that sits on a bit of old reclaimed timber, surrounded with some corrugated steel that came off the side of an agricultural shed or something.
You did say there was a lot of skip raiding going on.
There was a lot of a bit of skip raiding, but I think a lot of time trawling through various websites trying to find stuff. That was a learning curve for us. So going on the journey of trying to use reclaimed materials, it's something we've done for a few pieces in previous projects, but the scale of stuff that we wanted to do. So, for instance, we wanted to get all the doors to the WC cubicles reclaimed. So, where do you go to find 24 doors?
They're the 1930s doors or something.
Yeah,
they've got a real nice feel
nice,
to them,
like solid hardwood panel doors. I mean, if you tried to get those made new, it would cost an absolute fortune. But we managed to find them. I mean, it means you have to slightly rethink your processes. Yeah. So, what we wanted to persuade the contractor to do was wait till we had the doors on site before they built the walls.
Yeah.
So they could actually build the walls to the size of the doors as we had.
Did that happen?
They had to have a bit of adjustment. I think one of the key things is storage for things like that, because you need to get stuff onto site. So we were quite lucky on that project, is that we had a bit of space, a little bit of space, so we could just dump a load of doors and we reclaimed all sorts of things. So there are bits of sanitary ware, some of the old WCs and the old toilets we reclaimed, loads of light fittings are reclaimed, lots of furniture. Whenever we could, I think reuse is the way forward.
must have been quite an unusual job for the contractor, right? Because
yes.
you're not going in and fully fitting out.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, there was some interesting. I think one of the things we haven't talked about, it was the level of finish, which is really, really striking when you walk through the space. It's there's not much finish, to be honest. So we were very keen to really restrict that, just partly because of cost and partly because we worked out how much carbon there is in a plastered wall. And to try and explain that to a contractor is quite tricky, because obviously to go in and say, just make it look new is what they're used to you saying. But to say, actually, we need to do a little bit because we can't have bits of plaster falling on people's desks, but we want to limit that, becomes a very kind of difficult to define amount of work. Yeah. And they tend to come back and put a load of risk on that with a big number, and then we have to have a difficult conversation and walk around. So what we end up doing is quite a lot of work where we're basically highlighting loads of photographs and saying put a bit of plaster here and a bit of plaster there, but don't do anything else, and leave all this and leave all this, and it has to be very visual and very descriptive. But it took a while. It was a learning curve, but they got there. I
think what surprised me was the tonnage you were talking about, not plastering. Even just a space of 40,000 square foot was like 60 tons, I think you said, of carbon saved.
So it was 60 tons for not plastering the walls. I think we worked out that there's about 11 tons of carbon saved from not decorating,
just from painting.
From paint. And then the paint that we did use, we used a graphene-based paint, which is very low carbon and very low in toxins and things. And the difference between using that paint and a typical paint, again, was like a couple of tons. Really? So you start to add all these, see the really significant differences, which is going back to what I was talking about before, about being really strategic about the brief and thinking, what do you need to do? Because what we did in terms of carbon was we ran a model of what we were doing and a model of what a typical office development might do, and see where the differences were. And it was always that. It was the doing less. It was taking out big chunks of material,
I guess it seems quite obvious, doesn't it, that the doing less is going to be, but it's a hard decision to make sometimes.
It's a hard decision, and I think it's sometimes, it makes you feel like you're not really trying, or you're not putting the effort in, or you're losing your creative agency as a designer. Yeah. And I think we try and fight back against that. I think actually, by being really strategic about what you're doing and thinking really hard, that is part of the creative process, and it really forces you to sort of focus in on the important decisions and make those right. I think we're quite often faced with sort of blank canvas syndrome, as I call it, and we just want to do stuff. That's kind of the instinct: draw things here and here and everywhere. But no, limit it back.
We did talk about when we were on site about the fact that we're all looking for that portfolio moment because we're creators, right?
Yeah.
But I think some of the photos you've got of the site, when you think about it, you wouldn't think they are going to be these portfolio, because you've got the patchy walls and stuff, but they've got so much character to them. It
was really interesting you say that, because that was when we had the first images back. There was I think we had a slight sense of underwhelming. It took a while for us to realise that actually what it was the way the photographers had gone about it, I think, which was because it was a very different project. They'd actually hemmed into details which we didn't think were photographable details, where there were these kind of sort of layers and textures and contrasts, and reproduced that and made some beautiful images. And we thought, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. But it's but it's not typically the way you approach photographing an architectural project. But that it's all different. That's the point.
Did you set off with Material Works to be a sustainable practice? I mean, or did you find that this project as one of the first ones that you started with?
Or
early ones started to define it?
Definitely. I mean, the practice, my background was doing larger scale commercial retrofits for developers rather than end users. And having done quite a lot of that, was quite aware of the amount of waste that goes into it, and also quite aware of how rigid some of the thinking can be in that world. So very much wanted to do something different, and very much wanted to lead on some of the work that I'd done before, which was focused on actually celebrating what we have in existing buildings much more, and moving away from an idea of reinvention, reimagining, which I think is what we're kind of used to, and actually is necessarily energy intensive and probably not doing the right thing.
And you also said you'd been doing quite a bit of research on retrofits.
Yeah.
And, there's this presumption that, you know, a retrofit these can be like sustainable, but
yeah. So I mean, I think the interesting research we were looking at was analysing life cycles of buildings.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about what the upfront carbon is in a brand new office building. So you build a brand new office building, there's 700 kilos per square metre of carbon. And then you see the fit out of that building as a very small part of that. And it is when you first built it, because obviously there's loads of concrete in the ground and stuff like that, which is super intensive. But if you actually analyse the cycle of refit, of rip out, strip out, refit again and again and again, then that obviously that internal work becomes increasingly sort of important in that overall calculation, to the extent that if you're looking at a 60-year life cycle and you're looking at replacing your interiors every 12 years, which is not unlikely, then you're probably over 60 years adding up as much carbon as the original building. So I think once people start to think of it in that perspective, you realise actually the way we're doing things is not working. It's not getting us nearer net zero. You might start with a better building in the first place, but unless you're focusing the same amount of attention onto that cycle, then you're not changing. So that's why I think we talk about moving away from strip out, fit out, and into being sustainable stewards of buildings, and what that means, and you know, really dealing with what you've got, and trying to be subtle and inventive with ways you adapt that, and let the building continue being useful, rather than having to think every time someone comes in, cover all the walls, cover all the surfaces, reimagine everything. Yeah, but that's a big change for people, right? That's quite a difficult thing maybe for the industry to get its head around, but we need to.
What's your dream project?
Oh, well, to do more work like this, I think, really. I mean, I think that's another thing, you know, talking about relearning what you started with. You come out of college, in my generation, we all wanted to make sort of crazy geometry and crazy wacky new buildings. And I think increasingly the focus is on what we do with existing buildings. And how we can do really inventive things that make these buildings very desirable and usable and comfortable, and do that in ways that are inventive but highly sustainable. I think that's the challenge for designers in all fields, really. So rising to that is what we want to do. So yeah, more of the same, please.
I mean, it speaks for itself, because I believe that the sustainable workspace is pretty much full.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a joy when that happens, because it was a risk for them. It was about 3 times bigger than their previous space.
Right.
So it was quite a step up. Obviously there was a bit of demand there, but no, it was full within about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, of them opening.
Wow, that's amazing. And
has been full ever since, which is, you know, why they're thinking of other possibilities, which is, you know, nice to be involved with. But yeah, so yeah, that's the cherry on the cake. We took a lot of risks in that building. I think we kind of stretched people's perceptions on what levels of finish certainly could be.
Yeah.
And there was, you know, that few moments like that, we were hoping it would work out, but it certainly has, which is great.
Amazing. That's a great project. Dickon, thank you so much. Really interesting.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.